Donald Trump has signed an executive order preventing illegal immigrants from being counted in redrawing of voting districts. Fox News says it comes as part of an ongoing push by the Trump administration to make sure that illegal immigrants are not included in the census. And let's start counting down until the lawsuits begin. However, I believe this is coming off of Donald Trump's failed DACA. Well, he tried to repeal DACA and he lost. But as Trump has said, the Supreme Court ruling actually gave him some pretty broad new powers, or argued that he's always had them in the first place. We'll see how this plays out. This is a very important story, by the way. For those that aren't familiar with how the census works, if there is somebody in a state who is not a citizen, they can still be counted as a resident because the census doesn't ask if you are a citizen. We then draw congressional districts based on illegal immigrants. If this goes through, California is going to lose, I can only imagine, some seats. I don't believe that they're going to lose a lot because it's been a while since I've gone through the data. But you understand that many of these jurisdictions in big urban centers have a lot of people who are not citizens, depending on which estimates you use. And with this executive order, some congressional seats, some electoral votes may actually slip away. We'll see. But let's read the story because there's a really interesting argument about why Trump has the power to do this. They say President Trump on Tuesday signed an executive order to prevent illegal immigrants from being counted for the purposes of redrawing congressional districts after the 2020 census, reheating a fiery debate from last year on if illegal immigrants should be counted in the census. There used to be a time when you could proudly declare, I am a citizen of the U.S., but now the radical left is trying to erase the existence of this concept and conceal the number of illegal aliens in our country, Trump said in a statement accompanying the apportionment memorandum on ensuring American citizens receive proper representation in Congress. This is all part of a broader left-wing effort to erode the rights of American citizens, and I will not stand for it. The order says that for the purposes of reapportionment, it is the policy of the United States to exclude from the apportionment base aliens who are not in a lawful immigration status, to the maximum extent feasible and consistent with the discretion delegated to the executive branch. Census counts are used to determine the allocation of seats in the House of Representatives, the number of electors in the Electoral College, and hundreds of billions of dollars of federal spending. However, it is not clear how the administration would determine who was in the country illegally, since the census currently does not either include a citizenship question or the additional questions about legal immigration status. Quote, today's action to exclude illegal aliens from the apportionment base reflects a better understanding of the Constitution and is consistent with the principles of our representative democracy, Trump said. My administration will not support giving congressional representation to aliens who enter or remain in the country unlawfully, because doing so would create perverse incentives and undermine our system of government. Just as we do not give political power to people who are here temporarily, we should not give political power to people who should not be here at all. The order, giving justification, says the Constitution does not specifically define which persons must be included in the apportionment base. And there's a really interesting argument in all of this. And that argument is basically the advancement of transportation technology, notably airplanes. And cars. Motorcycles, I guess. The idea is basically this. Well, let me read and I'll break it down for you. They don't bring up transportation, but I will. But they say, although the Constitution requires the persons in each state, excluding Indians not taxed, to be enumerated in the census, that requirement has never been understood to include in the apportionment base every individual physically present within a state's boundaries at the time of the census. Instead, the term persons in each state has been interpreted to mean that only the inhabitants of each state should be included. Determining which persons should be considered inhabitants for the purpose of apportionment requires the exercise of judgment. I completely agree. Let's say 200 years ago, we are doing the census and I'm in New York and someone says, howdy, you're in New York. I'd like to take you down for the census. Congratulations. The number has been tracked. Now, horses existed. You could still travel quite a distance, but planes kind of change things. And now you run the risk of being in the same place multiple times when the census is being taken. So I guess there's an argument that if you're in a state, you're not a resident or an inhabitant simply because you're there. No one's going to write down my neighbor, my brother from California is visiting New York. I'm going to include him in the census, right? I guess arguably you could, and this may have happened in the past, but More importantly, we need a better defined, inhabitant for the census beyond just legal citizen or otherwise. I think it's an important distinction because I'm sure someone might be temporarily staying with you for a month or so, and you might be like, oh yeah, this person's living here right now. And now what? You're going to get, let me make this argument. Let's say you have more buildings in New York than you do in Wyoming. Someone might argue my, 7 family members are all visiting, so I'm going to put them down as residents because there's more room here. Then the likelihood that the census is skewed in favor, disproportionately favoring larger cities because of more space and a higher likelihood there's guests, there's a potential that the numbers get skewed in general. So that's just something I thought of. I'm not saying it's a part of Trump's actual argument. He's making this argument that defining what an inhabitant is requires judgment. And that's the point I'm trying to make. They say the order cites estimates that one state, apparently referring to California, has more than 2.2 illegal immigrants, 6% of its population. It argues that as a result, including illegal immigration in the population for apportionment could result in the allocation of 2 or 3 more congressional seats than if they were not included. It comes as part of an ongoing push by the Trump administration to make sure that illegal immigrants are not included in the census. The order will likely be subjected to a legal challenge from immigrant activist groups and others. The Supreme Court last year blocked a citizenship question from being included in the census and sent the question back to the lower courts after concluding the Trump administration's reasoning for including such a question was insufficient. It had been opposed from Democrats and immigrant groups on the basis that it could discourage immigrants from responding. I do believe we have a problem if we are going to be giving taxpayer funds to people who are potentially not paying taxes. I understand the whole argument about illegal immigrants do pay taxes. I'm sure many of them do, but what about those who don't? If it's one person getting a cut of our community funds, we have serious problems. If it's one person who is being given disproportionate electoral college weight, we have a problem. And that brings me now to the electoral college and the absurdities of the Democrats and the leftist argument. They say the electoral college is bad. Okay, you want to get rid of the electoral college? Sure. I have a feeling that the electoral college greatly benefits the left because non-citizens are counted in the census, meaning electoral votes go to places, 6% perhaps, giving 1 or 2 extra votes to California. Well, that's not fair, is it? So maybe Trump is right, and maybe the electoral college is still an important thing, even if it's not being, handled properly. They say Trump later signed an executive order to get an accurate count of citizens and non-citizens present in the country. Attorney General Bill Barr said at the same time that the information collected via the executive order could be useful in determining the makeup of the Electoral College and congressional apportionment. That information will be used for countless purposes. For example, there is a current dispute over whether illegal aliens can be included for apportionment purposes. We'll be studying the issue, Barr said. Of course, the left is going to challenge this, but I defer back to something I brought up in my main channel segment, something said by Mike Pence, that this election will not just be about whether or not you're liberal or conservative, Republican or Democrat. It's whether America remains America. And that's a really good point. So long as there are far leftists who want open borders and believe that anybody should be able to come here and just get access to everything, there really is the risk of this country not existing. I guess it'll exist in name only. But it makes me wonder about this looming second civil war. We have the Republicans and Democrats once again. The Republicans won the last Civil War. Perhaps they'll win this one. But if the Democrats win this Civil War, something will fundamentally change. We will have overt open borders. We will have this new idea that people who aren't actually citizens are citizens, and there's no requirement to be a citizen. Anyone can simply come here and just be a citizen. And that will be the end of the Union. States won't matter. Borders won't matter. There won't be a United States. So Trump is seeking to preserve this union, perhaps, and he may have to send federal law enforcement into various jurisdictions to defend federal jurisdiction. So I wonder, I didn't include this in the main channel segment because it is a bit different and a little, it's not super related to the idea of civil war, but it is related to the idea that America will not remain America if Democrats take control of the federal government. I just believe that to be a fact. I know it's weird because a lot of people have said the same thing over the past several decades as it pertains to these elections. Like, this is the one, this is the end. Will there be an America? People thought with Obama it was the end of the world. South Park made fun of it. But I wasn't compelled to vote in any of these elections. I didn't care. You weren't going to convince me that this really was, life or death. Now, not so much. Now, with everything I've seen, I have friends who are lighting up and saying that they're going to go vote for Trump. The leftists don't want to believe it, but it's true. People I met at Black Lives Matter protests, for instance, telling me they're voting for Trump. It may not mean Trump is going to win. I don't know. But I do believe, based on the rapid ideological shift of the far left, we are facing a vote as to whether or not America will be America. Stick around. I got 2 more segments coming up in just a few minutes, and I will see you all shortly.